All right, so one more note on best practices, and it's that we're going to stop using the scope variable. Okay, if you have a single controller or just a handful of controllers, that's fine. Scope works just fine. But even then, it's a little bit disconcerting that you can declare variables here, like user or username, and magically they're somehow tied to this mythical scope on the controller. We would like to make that a little bit more explicit. Okay? Also, we would like to make sure that we control where these variables are being instantiated on. What are they being tied to? What instance are they being tied to? We would like to create our own scope, right? And especially if you have in more complex applications where you might have controllers nested inside of other controllers, you might have a view that has a main view that maybe has a left view and a right view, that has a header view and a footer view, and the main content might have other sub-little views, right? And each view would have its own little controller, yes? So when you start creating these hierarchies of complex components, the scope, right, is they're nested one inside of another, yes? If a view looks up a user object on the scope, it first checks the scope for its controller. It says, hey controller, do you have this variable user declared on your scope? If it doesn't find it, it navigates to its parent view, right? And it says, hey, I didn't find it. My controller didn't have that on the scope. And it goes to the parent and says, hey, do you have a user object? If it doesn't find it there, it'll just go hierarchically, will traverse the hierarchy of all the parent controllers all the way to the top, to root controller. Yes? So if any controller declares the user, then your user has a value. If it doesn't, it just doesn't render. Make sense? Which is perfectly fine. Yes? The problem is that now the user, the responsibility of controlling the value of that user variable, it's a little watered down. Who's responsible for that? Is it my controller or is it somebody somewhere in the hierarchy? It's almost it's bless you. It's almost like a go-to problem, right? Go-to it makes it harder to debug. If you have the wrong value, who do you blame? Is it my controller? Is the controller above? Is the controller above me? Right? It's very hard to determine what scope is defining the value of this variable. Yes? So ideally, we would like to be able to be very explicit who it is that's defining this instance. Make sense? Right? You understand the problem? So we're not going to use scope because of its default behavior of recursively going up the hierarchy, up the scope, the controller chain. Instead, what we're going to do is that we're going to use the following instead. We're going to declare it on the controller instance. What happens here when the controller is being declared? The function is being treated like a constructor, right? It uses this function as a constructor, right? The instance, the reference to that instance of the constructor is available through the variable this. Okay, like in many other languages, right? This has a reference to the current instance. So what we're going to do is that instead of using scope, we're going to declare a local variable, this, right? So it's going to be a local variable, and any value that we want to shuttle back and forth between the template and us, right? Like the user, any of these functions, right? Those we wanted to be tied, right, in the template and here in the controller. Instead of defining it on the scope, we're going to define it on the model, on this basically, right? On the local instance. So model, model, and model. Okay, right? And same thing for the login controller. So login controller, there it is. Instead of using scope, we're going to declare model this. Right? Okay, and then any variables, any functions, we're going to declare on the instance of the controller. Model this. Notice that I did not do this dot error message. Right? Instead, I'm using model. Yes? And you might say, well, why? Isn't it the same? Well, the problem is that this, the keyword this, has a funny behavior in JavaScript. It changes over time, right? As you go from one function call to another function call and whatnot, the value of this changes, right? It's not necessarily the original instance of the login controller, but in here it might be the instance of this function, which is not at all what I want. Okay, so that's why we are saving the original value of this, right, of the original pointer to that instance, and then we're using it all throughout the controller. So it's model.error message, and I think that's it, right? All right. Having done that, and you go back to the login. It doesn't work anymore. We broke it. Because these templates are still assuming that we're using the scope, that all the variables are declared on the scope, that they're not using the controller instance at all, right? They're still assuming that everything's on the scope. So those need to be changed as well, right? So to change them, we're going to need to do a couple of things. One of the things that we're going to need to do is that we're going to, instead of the templates declaring who their controller is, instead of having the templates declare their controllers in the profile also, instead of each view determining who their controller is, right? What we could do is that in the config, we can say, hey, login, your controller is the login controller. This is exactly the same thing, right? Of either declaring using ng controller or declaring it here, right? Here we have the benefit that we can change it. We can actually have one template have many controllers, right? We can have the same login template or the same profile template, mapped to two different routes, use two different controllers, right? We can decide what controller to use at any time, right? Over there, if we declare on the template, we only can declare that one controller. Okay, here we can configure it, right? Here, I don't believe the register does it have a controller? I don't believe so. No. The profile does have a controller. I think it's called profile controller, right? If we refresh, it still doesn't work. Okay, we're closer, but not yet. We need to somehow tell the template, hey, template, you are no longer using scope. Instead, what I want you to use is the controller instance. Okay, because now all the variables, all the functions are being declared on the instance of the controller. They're not being declared on the scope. Okay. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to say, hey, template, you can refer to the controller by the following name. You can choose any name. Model's a common name. Controller is also a very common name. Okay. We are basically giving the instance of the controller, we're giving it a name that can be used inside of the template. We're saying, hey, template, here's your controller, and here's how you can refer to it. And you can give it any name you want. You give it a name you want. Okay? But those are common names. I prefer model. So now the templates, back in the templates, we can now define this. We can now define any variable that originally was declared on the scope. We can define it on the controller instance, right? So now it's model.user.username, right? Now it's model.user.password, okay? Now it's model.login. So now the login function is declared on the controller instance, right? What else? This must be model.errorMessage, and this must be model.welcomeUser.username, I guess. Show also. All these are declared on the, used to be declared on the scope, right? Now everything is declared. I don't remember this on the controller. Do we? Is it there? We have error message. I don't think we implemented this. Welcome user dot username. Show model. I think maybe this was supposed to just model user. Right, when we set all right, we didn't need it, right? Because we when we successfully logged in, right, we just navigated away, right? There was no need to render it at all. Okay, but the error messages that makes sense. Okay, so now let's go back and try to refresh, log in. Still, we have an error. Let's see, console, proper username in the login controller, user. Let's see, we're passing user. Okay, so login passes user. The login function passes user. This one, okay, this is also model.user. Let's refresh. Okay, let's see another error. Property user username. Did I refresh? Wait, refresh. Huh. Let's see, controller. For a breakpoint right there. User undefined. User undefined. Model.user. 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 Model. Username. ng model. Model user. Yeah. So in the login. Okay, so I guess if the user that comes in, probably what we want to do here is if user not found. Okay, so if the user that comes in is there, probably wants to have a couple of validation, right? If this user is null, which is basically this right here, right? Okay, user not found, and return. And then we retrieve the user again from the user service using the username and password. User not found. Okay, let's try that again. Oh, great! Now I have two. User undefined. Model error. User, oh, it's undefined. I'm sorry. Okay, so one way to quickly do that is say if no user. Okay, user not found. But if I type something and I log in, notice that it's not undefined. It finds a user. Okay, didn't find the user because it was a sad user. But if I have Alice and Alice, let's see if it finds it. So we have, okay, we did find Alice, and it navigates to the profile. Okay, so that's working, right? So logging controller is working. But now the profile controller is not working, right? So let's fix that. Let's go back to the profile view, and let's tie everything to the model. So this would be model.user. This would be model.user. Anything else? Model.user. This would be, this doesn't have a model. Last name, date of birth, neither. These unregistered would be model, and update would be model. Okay, what else? Logout just should go back to the login page, right? So that would be hash bang login. Websites should go to the websites for that user. Right now we don't have websites. We'll do that in a minute. I think that's it. Okay, so let's refresh. There it is. Alice is being, we have that, right? If we log out, we can try Bob. And continue, and there it is. So it's working the same way as we had before, right? But without the use of $ scope. Okay? No $ scope. Okay. Everybody okay? All right.